The 16th century, or the 1500s, was a period of transformation for Europe. There was great religious upheaval from new Protestants that challenged the authority and power of the Roman Catholic Church. Meanwhile, European kings sought absolute power in some countries, while in others kings shared power with representative institutions that were increasingly demanding more rights in government. Opportunity from overseas trade helped fire the kindle of early capitalism, and scientific reasoning began to replace established thought with new perceptions of the world and the universe. In 1517, an obscure German monk posed a challenge to the Roman Catholic Church. Martin Luther of Wittenberg denounced the Church's sale of indulgences, a type of pardon that excused individuals from doing penance for their sins. Indulgences had been available since the 11th century, but to raise funds for the reconstruction of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, church authorities began to market indulgences aggressively in the early 1500s. Martin Luther saw indulgences as signs of greed, hypocrisy, and moral rot in the Roman Catholic Church. Luther believed that no human being had the power to absolve individuals of their sins and grant them admission to heaven. To Luther, indulgences were a fraud. Luther denounced the sale of indulgences in his 95 Theses. A popular legend has it that Martin Luther nailed the document to the church door in Wittenberg. Because of the newly invented printing press, copies of the theses were printed and became available throughout Europe, and open criticism of the Roman Catholic Church had begun. In 1520, in reaction, Pope Leo X excommunicated Luther from the church, but he still would not recant. He considered himself a Christian, and he held religious services for a community of devoted followers called Lutherans. By the 1520s, religious dissent had spread throughout much of Germany and Switzerland. By the 1530s, dissidents, known as Protestants, organized movements in France, England, the Low Countries, Italy, and Spain. By mid-century, Luther's act of individual rebellion had mushroomed into the Protestant Reformation, which shattered the religious unity of Western Christendom. Luther advocated the closure of monasteries, the translation of the Bible from Latin into common vernacular languages, and an end to priestly authority, including the authority of the Pope. He believed that salvation could never be earned through good works or through powers of others, or prayers from others. Instead, he argued that humans could only be saved through faith in the promises of God as revealed in the Bible. Several princes of the Holy Roman Empire warmed to Luther's views, partly because of personal conviction, but also because it offered them opportunities to build their own power bases. In Switzerland, a French lawyer named John Calvin took the opportunity to preach his idea of predestination to a close-knit group of Protestants forming there. Predestination was the idea that humans could never earn salvation, but also that God had in fact already determined which individuals would be saved from damnation before they were even born. These individuals were known as the elect. Calvinists were supposed to dress simply, to study the Bible regularly, and to refrain from activities such as playing cards and dancing. Calvinist missionaries were most active in France, where they attracted strong interest in the cities, but they ventured also to Germany, the Low Countries, England, Hungary, the Netherlands, and Scotland. In England, a Reformation took hold after King Henry VIII came into conflict with the Pope, who would not grant him a divorce because his wife had not given him a male heir. Henry severed relations with the Roman Catholic Church and became the head of the Anglican Church in England, and thus the Reformation was begun. The Catholic Church reacted with a counter-reformation of their own. The Council of Trent, held intermittently between 1545 and 1563, addressed matters of doctrine and reform for the Church. In 1540, St. Ignatius Loyola began the Society of Jesus, called Jesuits. They completed a rigorous and advanced education in theology, philosophy, languages, history, literature, and science. They became the most prominent Christian missionaries outside of Europe. Jesuits attracted converts in India, China, Japan, the Philippines, and Americas. Religious conflict in the 16th century would lead to bloody wars and destructive violence, such as the hunt for witches. In the 16th and 17th century, fears that individuals were making alliances with the devil sparked a widespread hunt for witches. About 110,000 individuals underwent trial suspected witches, and about 60,000 of them died either by hanging or being burned at the stake. Most of the victims were poor, old, single, or widowed women who lived on the margins of their societies and were easy targets for accusers. The pursuit of witches revealed clearly the stress and doubt and strains, both secular and religious, that afflicted Europe at the time. Religious wars culminated with the great continental conflict known as the 30 Years' War from 1618 to 1648. The war opened after the Holy Roman Emperor attempted to force his German Bohemian subjects to return to the Roman Catholic Church. The main battleground was Germany, but by the end of the conflict, most of Europe was dragged into it. The war was the most destructive European conflict before the 20th century. It ended with the Peace of Westphalia in 1648. The Peace of Westphalia did lay the foundation for a system of independent competing states that recognized their rights to organize their own domestic and religious affairs. At the time, the most common forms of government were absolute monarchies and constitutional states. Constitutional states took root in England and the Netherlands first. In these governments, authority was shared between representative governments and the king, and a constitution established laws by which both powers' rules were defined. The constitutional state only came to England after a violent English civil war that saw the King of England, Charles I, decapitated at the chopping block for tyranny. The result was that kings would forever have to rule in cooperation with Parliament. In countries like France and Russia, kings increased their power and control on a theoretical foundation known as the divine right of kings. This theory held that kings derived their authority from God and served as God's lieutenant upon earth. There was no role in divine right theory for common subjects or even nobles. The king made law and determined policy. The extreme wealth and power controlled by absolute monarchs of the time is perhaps best exemplified in the lavish court that King Louis XIV, known as the Sun King of France, had built for himself in Versailles. The 16th century also saw population growth and rapid urbanization that helped spur a round of remarkable economic development. This economic growth coincided with the emergence of capitalism, an economic system in which private parties make their goods and services available on a free market and seek to take advantage of market conditions to profit from their activities. The capitalist economic order developed as businessmen learned to take advantage of market conditions in distant places via efficient networks of transportation and communication. For example, Dutch merchants might purchase cheap grain from Poland, store it in Amsterdam until they learned about a famine in the Mediterranean, and then transport it and sell it in southern France or Spain for an enormous profit. Joint stock companies were the new institutions of capitalism. Large trading companies such as the English East India Company and the Dutch East India Company organized trade on a large scale by spreading the risks and profits of expensive business enterprises to a number of stockholders. Lastly, the scientific revolution led to the reconception of the universe. In 1543, the Polish astronomer Nicolaus Copernicus argued that the sun rather than the earth stood at the center of the universe, and that the planets, including the earth, revolved around the sun. This greatly changed the perception created by Ptolemy of Alexandria in the middle of the 2nd century AD that the earth was motionless and the universe moved around it.